Welcome back, one and all, from all over the universe. Mystic Radio Believe Me Movement is brought to you by RobinAlexis.com. I am your host, Spirit Lady Robin Alexis. This is the second season with special guest Amazon best-selling author Ken Sylvester. I thought after 19 years, my husband Bob Bordenaro and I had put our podcast into retirement. And we did retire for about 5 months, and then came along Ken Sylvester. He's the author of the Amazon best-selling book, We're Not Alone and Here's the Proof. And that changed everything. I took Mystic Radio out of retirement, and now Mystic Radio has been on the air for 20 years. Special guest Ken Sylvester and I created 8 shows talking about both of our books. Mine, A Conversation with Extraterrestrials, and again, Ken Sylvester's book is We're Not Alone and Here's the Proof. And both are available on Amazon. Now, in this 20th year of Mystic Radio and in our second season of Mystic Radio with special guest Ken, we are changing it up again. We have added a new Mystic Radio show, the Mystic Radio Believe Me Movement podcast. And it's brought to you by RobinAlexis.com. Now, what is the Believe Me movement? Listen up, and you'll find out. With the help of Ken's brother Dave, we love you, Dave, we now bring to you UFO Hunters YouTube channel. We encourage you to like and subscribe to UFO Hunters so you will receive an email alerting you to new content on UFO Hunters YouTube channel. Ken and I felt that we have so much to offer for our fellow comrades who are interested in UFOs, alien abductions, and all things paranormal that we decided to create the Mystic Radio Believe Me movement, YouTube channel, and membership. You are invited to the YouTube channel. Again, it's UFO Hunters. And on our new show, Ken and I will host people who volunteer to come on as a guest to discuss their perspectives and experiences with UFOs, extraterrestrial interactions, and more. Now, if you would like to be a guest on our show, you email me at spiritladyrobin@gmail.com. That's spiritladyrobin@gmail.com. So ask yourself, would you like to be in the seat of honor sharing your experiences with UFOs, abductions, and more? Come and be a guest live on our show. We want to hear your stories. We want to witness how it has affected you. And on our show, you will be respected. And before we proceed any further on the show, let's remember that no matter what version of Mystic Radio you have listened to for the past 20 years, it's always important to remember that anything you hear on this podcast, it's up to you to discern if it rings true to you or not. We're not telling you what to think. We are just encouraging you to know, trust, and act upon your own knowing. We are an experience, not an explanation. Welcome to Captain Ken. Hi, Ken.
Hi there, Robin.
I'm so excited to be back on the air with you.
Yes, that was a great introduction. And today what I'm going to do is, as our listeners may or may not know, is I added a new chapter to my book called The Final Proof. And I call it The Final Proof because I had already proven, I believe, through the 40 UFO stories that aliens do exist. And then I found a live witness. The rest were all done through research. And you're going to get to talk to this live witness today and tell you about her experience that she had. I found the information out, and it's been well documented. Most witnesses in this book, they're very old, or they're no longer with us. As this book was being published, when I got introduced to Robin Alexis, she was in the process of having her book published called A Conversation with Extraterrestrials. After several discussions, I discovered that Robin Alexis had undeniable and well-documented proof that aliens do indeed exist, proving once again that we're not alone. In addition to the 40 top UFO cases, as I said, we're now going to give you our live witness, Robin Alexis, who currently lives in Mount Shasta, California. As you continue to listen, you will hear the most extraordinary, incredible story that's in this book. This story ties in with one of the most well-documented abduction cases in UFO history. That story is the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill. Robin Alexis was abducted shortly after Betty and Barney Hill, apparently by the same aliens. They were dressed the same. But first, the history of Betty and Barney Hill. Just brief. It all started approximately at 10 p.m. on December 19, 1961. Betty and Barney Hill were returning from their honeymoon in Niagara Falls to their house in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Barney was driving. He was traveling south on Route 3 when suddenly they noticed through their window this huge bright light that seemed to be following them. The bright light turned out to be a UFO, which blocked their path around Indian Head, New Hampshire. Now, they both were walking up a ramp, entering a huge silver metallic spaceship. As they were boarding, they noticed what looked like a humanoid creature through a large window. Next, they were led to separate rooms, put on top of a metal examination table. Then the aliens started to remove samples. They took skin, hair, nails, and other samples from various parts of their body. They all wore uniforms, and one of the aliens was a bit taller. He appeared to be the guy in charge. Betty then asked the tall alien guy where their home planet was. The alien then showed Betty a map of the star system that they were from. They were from Zeta Reticuli star system. Although Betty and Barney described what's become known to us as the Greys, they were actually Zetas, an advanced race of the Greys with large, bald heads and large black eyes. After the abduction, they were returned to their car, but they were about 35 miles south of Indian Head in Ashland with no idea how they got there. Now I'm going to turn this over to our live witness, Robin Alexis, to tell you her story.
Wow. I have read what you just were speaking about, and to hear you talk about it, it just blows my mind how similar it is to the experience I'm about to read to you. And I say read because this is literally an excerpt from the first book I wrote. It's called Spirit Lady, The Gift of Robin Song. And this is chapter 2. And I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but enough to have our listeners see the commonality between Betty and Barney Hill and myself. So here's from my book, Spirit Lady, The Gift of Robin Song. My mother would explain my peculiarities to others by saying, quote, I had quite an imagination. An example of my notorious imagination was the night the spacemen came to visit when I was 6 years old. I woke up because a bright white light filled my room. I found myself and other family members literally floating out of our beds. Once outside, I could see that this was happening to the whole neighborhood. We were all levitated towards a spaceship, where we took our places standing in a line. I appeared to be the only one who was awake, while everyone else was apparently sleepwalking. One of the space beings seemed willing to converse with me telepathically. Without fear or hesitation, I began to ask questions. I wasn't scared of these little beings whose mouths were very small and didn't move. They answered my questions. It made me feel like I could trust them. No human had ever answered all my questions so respectfully. They, unlike my mother, welcomed me in my totality. Their attention made me feel like I had dignity, that my internal world, which was such a potential threat to my fragile link to the family and friends, was okay. Their heads were very large, with large dark eyes. They didn't have any clothes on, but they didn't look naked. Their arms hung down to their knees, and their movements reminded me of strained puppets, making them seem robotic. But their presence was not lifeless. Their mouths fascinated me. They didn't eat like us. I think they swallow pills for food, or maybe that's all that I could imagine fitting into their mouths. I felt bad that they couldn't enjoy eating. I remember when I looked in their eyes, they couldn't connect with my empathy for them. In fact, they had no emotional reactions to anything. It was clear that my joy in them was an extremely odd expression for them to witness. We went up a large ramp into the spaceship, and I was brought to a small room that had a shiny gray metal table in it. It reminded me of my doctor's office, only there wasn't any toys. 5 or 6 of the little beings surrounded the examination table. They told me telepathically not to be afraid and explained to me everything they were doing. They said I was special because I was so aware of them. I didn't resist their examination. I was never scared. Then they took me to meet the captain in the control room. Unlike the others, this one seemed delighted in my childlike curiosity. I looked out the big windows and sat in front of the cockpit equipment. I asked to go for a ride, although I don't know if that happened or not. I felt so at home that my heart ached for them when I woke up back in my house the next morning. This was my first, but not my last, interaction with extraterrestrials. I told a couple of kids that a spaceship had come, thinking maybe it would upgrade my social status, and several of them set out to prove me right or wrong. As we approached the field where I had seen the ship, I realized we weren't going to see any evidence. The children laughed at me, and I was embarrassed. As my lip began to quiver, my sister took me by the hand and escorted me home. She handed me over to my mother, who rocked me in the wooden rocking chair that her mother had rocked her in. "Robin," she said, stroking my baby fine hair, "you must never talk about your strange imagination. The other children will not like you." It was another lesson in keeping my mouth shut about my odd ability to see and communicate with the unseen by others. A few years later, my mother informed me that an article had appeared, I lost my place here, in Life magazine about 2 adults, Betty and Barney Hill, who told about their alien abduction, which had taken place within 15 minutes of our house at about the same time I had told my mother of my quote-unquote dream. I didn't bother to ask her any questions. By then, I was thoroughly indoctrinated into the good little Christian girl mentality. In order to be loved by God and my mother, I would have to abnegate my right to acknowledge my sixth sense. Better to stick with trying to fit into the daily life of my family, tend to my tiny Thumbelina doll, and get used to quietly going to church on Sundays. So imagine, okay, that's the end of what I'm going to read to you from Chapter 2 in my book, Spirit Lady, The Gift of Robin Song. It was really, really traumatic to be more welcomed by extraterrestrials than by my own family. It was so confusing. And, now I'm 69 years old, and I met Ken Sylvester, who, for the first time, made me realize that I could be exactly who I really am and talk about these experiences. So, Ken, thank you so much.
You're most welcome, Robin. And I think that the listeners are going to know that when they do share their stories with us, you're going to be talking to a person that's an experienced person. This isn't somebody who's just listened to stories like a psychiatrist, and I'm not certainly knocking psychiatrists. This is someone that actually had an experience with that. So why should you believe me? Why should you believe any of this? Well, let's examine what we find in common with both these abductions. They both occurred the same day. The distance between the first abduction and Robin's house is only 9 miles. They stood in line on a ramp to enter the ship. All the people that were abducted had experiments done to them while lying on a metal table. They also, the aliens were described the same, gray skin, large bald head, large black eyes. The aliens fashionably did wear tight uniforms, apparently all black they liked for some reason. All the witnesses were hypnotized and told the same story. So we've given you 2 well-documented abduction stories. In both stories, they were subject to hypnosis more than once. Both Betty and Barney went through several sessions, And Robin went through a previous session with Dr. Mack and then recently undergone a second hypnosis back in October of this year, confirming everything. And they did evaluations by medical professionals have concluded that individuals who believe that they were abducted by aliens did not exhibit any underlying mental health conditions that could explain these experiences. After thorough psychological assessments, factors have determined that the individuals in question were not suffering from disorders such as delusions, hallucinations, or any other mental issues typically associated with these beliefs. This suggests that from a clinical perspective, their experiences are not the result of psychological factors. The doctor's conclusion and our conclusion, they're telling the truth. Now what happened next is, this is where we decided to start the journey, the Believe Me movement. This is not a journey to the Twilight Zone. This is reality. It's a journey to the Earth Zone, a place to bring, we're looking to bring about a change in human consciousness, a place to be mindful and take the time to remember your soul's purpose. We believe that all souls have a purpose while here on Earth. So take the time to find out what your purpose might be. Rob and I believe we can make a difference. We are attempting to get a message out. The message first is that aliens do indeed exist. Humans had encounters with aliens. You may have already had one of those experiences or know someone that has. Maybe someone even told you that they did and you did not believe them. Rob and I have both had experiences very early in our lives. Robin told her story first time over 40 years ago, and she was not believed. So Robin has taken a chance, retelling this story now, that did traumatize her and subject her to the same rejection that she received 40 years ago. She underwent hypnosis a second time, as I mentioned, back in October, the end of October. Her story didn't change. So you just heard her story that you may find hard to believe, but that doesn't mean that it's not true. We are starting the Believe Me movement to give people a place to share their story without judgment, to make it acceptable to talk about alien encounters without disbelief, ridicule, being labeled a nutcase, or outright rejection. This is why I've added the story about Robin's first abduction. They experienced this alien encounter when she was only 6 years old. Her mom and dad totally rejected her story. As stated earlier, it was a very traumatizing experience. As I stated in the book, any encounter with a UFO may cause a biological effect. This is one of the observables: distress, trouble sleeping, traumatized, sometimes reliving what happened and not being able to tell anyone out of fear. If you've been abducted, if you fear when it might happen again, most people who are abducted can start when they're very young and last throughout their life. Robin continues to be abducted to this day, but because of her skill set, she's been upgraded to a more beloved alien race known as the Pleiadians. It's a very friendly alien species. They are one of the more advanced, sophisticated alien species. She does not recall being abducted by the Pleiadians, who have discovered how to control humans so they don't remember. The only way to recall the abduction is through regressive hypnosis. Robin has held this story back, as I said, for 40 years. She feels compelled to tell her story, to set an example so others might finally come forward and tell their story. We've included a picture of Robin's mom and dad. After Robin, her mom and her dad were hypnotized by Dr. Mack in 1988, he confirmed that Robin had indeed been telling the truth. The picture was taken after they were finally convinced that Robin once told her mom at 6-year-old was definitely the truth. The picture is also on the page titled The Believe Me Movement. It was taken during Halloween, and showing that her parents had a great sense of humor. It also was a big moment in Robin's life to finally be accepted by her parents and other family members and some friends that doubted her story was true. So we invite you to come forward and tell your story. If you had to keep it secret, this now is a chance to relieve yourself from the burden of keeping it locked up in your brain. We welcome all to tell their story. You'll be greeted with an open mind, open arms, and a chance to share with thousands of other people with the same common denominator. We also will have information on how to contact somebody professionally if you so desire. After a while, we also will start a support group, which you may find helpful to share your story with other experiencers. We look forward to hearing from you, and our hope is for all mankind to accept the new reality that aliens do exist. They have been visiting us for thousands of years. Our mission, Robin and I, as stated previously, is bringing about a change in human consciousness and how to come to grips with this new reality. On the same day that Betty and Barney Hill were famously abducted in '61, Robin, a 6-year-old girl, was also abducted that same day. I repeat it because this is a chilling event which has been overshadowed by the Hills' encounter involving themes of innocence, fear, and the unknown. Robin's story is filled with intrigue and unanswered questions. It raises compelling discussions about childhood safety, the phenomenon of abduction, and the lasting impact which events have on families and communities. Robin begins to address these matters in her book, A Conversation with Extraterrestrials, and we are both looking forward to witnessing you as you share your experience with us about your encounters with extraterrestrials. So join us, the Believe Me movement, and let's form a community of open-minded experiences. Listen to our podcast, Mystic Radio Believe Me Movement, or become a special guest. When you are ready, we are here for you. You're not alone. Robin will now tell you how to get in touch with us.
Well, I got to first say, Ken, that I don't think you have any idea how much you validating my inner child, having that experience, and then, you know, being shunned and shut down, how much that affected my self-esteem and my sense of self-worth. And, you know, being taught that I was crazy was rather tough when I was a kid, that the way that I was wrong. And now, after all these decades and the hypnosis that, you know, I've had twice now, and with your support and your encouragement, it's just life-changing for me. So again, if you want to read the chapter that, well, the whole book, but the chapter that we're referring to in this show, it's in Ken Sylvester's book called We're Not Alone, and Here's the Proof. And he added the chapter about my experience and the hypnosis, which is, when you read the chapter and you read the further detail about the hypnosis and the extent of the abduction experience on that night, if anyone's from New Hampshire, or certainly from the Plymouth, New Hampshire area, you may want to get hypnotized. You may want to come on the show and talk with Ken and I. And again, this show is Mystic Radio Believe Me Movement. You will find it on UFO Hunters YouTube channel. And we are also starting a membership on this YouTube channel. So we do encourage you to like and subscribe to UFO Hunters so that you can know when we're posting something new, and you'll know when the membership is becoming available. If you want to come on the podcast with us, you need to email me at spiritladyrobin@gmail.com. That's spiritladyrobin@gmail.com. And let us know that you want to come on and tell your story. And Ken and I will support you because it's very, very healing to be able to be validated. And, you know, as the first recipient of being healed by the Mystic Radio Believe Me movement with Ken, it's pretty obvious. I'm sure you can hear it in my voice how much this has meant to me. So I hope you feel that invitation to become a guest on our show. And again, this show, Mystic Radio Believe Me Movement, it is brought to you by RobinAlexis.com. Ken, is there anything else you'd like to say before we end this particular first show?
Just if our listeners are interested, we're posting the first 8 episodes on the YouTube channel. So if you missed our season 1, within the next couple days, so far there are 4. The first 4 episodes are on YouTube, available now, and we'll be adding them as time permits. And within a couple days, all 8 episodes will be there. And then this episode is scheduled to air on the 20th of January. We may give a pre-teaser before that, but this will be available on YouTube starting around January 20th. Thank you all for listening today.
Thank you, Ken.
Robin?
Yeah, this is so wonderful. It's like a dream come true, that being witnessed and respected for having had an experience with extraterrestrials. Over and out, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Over and out.